Always, I said many times, I could play with 11 midfield players, I would play with 11 midfield players. And of course, I love midfield players.
Can you guess the next move here? What about this one? Or here? Or this one? There's a reason why Pep is in love with midfielders in general. But why only midfielders? There's one critical aspect that sets the best apart, and it has nothing to do with how fast they can run, how hard they can shoot, or even how many tricks they can pull off. So what is it? And more importantly, what do they do to get so much love from Pep Guardiola? In football, possession is fleeting. The average player touches the ball for mere seconds during a 90-minute match. This means most of the game happens without the ball. Great players excel because they know what they'll do even before the ball reaches them. You've likely heard phrases like reading the game or being one step ahead. This is not a coincidence. It's a skill. When teams press, they often aim to limit passing options. A player who hasn't scanned the field ahead of time, only facing the ball, is forced to rely on reflexive decisions under pressure and often loses the ball. But those who anticipate the play already have their escape routes mapped out. They spot passing lanes, opponents' positioning, and space they can exploit before the ball arrives. Sergio Busquets is the epitome of this awareness. Watch him for Barcelona, Spain, or now Inter Miami, and you'll notice his constant glances over his shoulder. He doesn't just scan for defenders closing in, but evaluates where his teammates are and which spaces are open. A typical scenario: Isco presses Busquets as the ball is passed to him. Instead of panicking, Busquets calmly turns away from pressure smoothly and releases a perfectly weighted pass to a teammate breaking the line. His awareness lets him turn high pressure situations into opportunities to transition. Why? Because he scanned way before. Rodri offers a similar case for Manchester City. Whether playing deep or stepping into the midfield, Rodri positions himself based on multiple scans. If he notices an opponent pressing from the right, he'll angle his body to shield the ball and simultaneously create an angle for a leftward pass. Most players look for open space. The best, however, let space come to them. This is where they use their understanding of opposition movement to influence the game. Think about how a defensive line operates. When opponents are defending, gaps inevitably form. A savvy player who knows when to hold their position instead of running, by staying still, they allow the opposition to move the space over to them, creating pockets of space around them. Now, he might not be a midfielder exactly, but we all know Messi's walking football, so I had to use him as an example. At first glance, it seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't the best player be moving the most? No. The best players scan and process the most. Messi's genius lies in how he observes defensive patterns while appearing passive. When the defense shifts to block passing options, Messi drifts into the blind spot of midfielders or defenders. Standing still, he awaits for an opening, and when it appears, he's already there. One striking example came during a game against France. Messi scans 5-6 times seconds before he receives the ball, and he's able to remember seeing Fernandes a couple of moments ago and is fully aware later on, when he has the ball on his feet, who he should pass it to. Which brings us into the next point. Scanning the field isn't unique to great players. Many do it. What sets players like Busquets, Rodri, Kante apart is what they do with the information. They piece together clues, from the positioning of opponents to their body language and even subtle tells like which foot they prefer to control the ball with. Imagine the game as a giant puzzle. Every opponent's movement, every slight misstep adds a piece to the picture. The best players don't just read one clue, they connect them all. For instance, when the ball is in the air, instead of looking at the ball, the best players scan and look at what the options the nearest player to the ball has. N'Golo Kante doesn't just intercept passes by chance. He reads the movement not only of the opposition, but also of his teammates and is able to get there first. He isn't the tallest, the strongest, or fastest, and on top of that, he's definitely not the closest to the ball in this situation. Still, he manages to get there first through scanning, rendering the same information everyone can see quicker than everyone else. Rodri adds another layer. When an opponent lines up to press, Rodri often takes a half step to the side, forcing the pressing player to adjust their angle. This slight movement buys Rodri enough time to find space or direct the ball to the next player. Many players glance around to decide their next move, but the truly elite use this scanning to prepare multiple steps ahead. They predict how opponents will react to their initial action and use that to their advantage. Consider a chessboard. Average players focus on their next move. Masters think several moves ahead, anticipating their opponent's strategy. The same applies in football. A midfielder might fake a pass to draw a defender out of position, only to use the space created by that movement for a different play entirely. Kevin De Bruyne at Manchester City, often when he receives the ball near the edge of the box, he crosses it without even looking at Haaland. People and commentators say that they practiced and that's why he can find him without even looking. Although this might be true, Mostly, it's the brain scanning before the cameras are even on him. How are you supposed to defend against that? Messi too exploit this mental chess game. Against Real Madrid in El Clasico, Messi noticed Marcelo's tendency to overcommit when defending one-on-one. Messi would seek out Marcelo to exploit Real Madrid's weakness, so he forced Marcelo to one-on-ones, and you already know what happened.
When Messi has the ball, 1-1-1, you are dead.
Elite players constantly evaluate the opposition's shape, both defensively and offensively. This information helps them to identify spaces to exploit and anticipate where the ball will be next. When pressing, teams often leave one area of the field exposed. Recognizing this vulnerability requires an understanding of formations. A basic example could be that the high press may expose space behind, while a more advanced example is a number 6 knowing his player will follow him, moving up out of his zone to create space in front of him for his number 8 or 10 to drop into after the number 6 receives the ball, to then on one touch give it to his teammate facing forwards. By observing these patterns early, players can position themselves to capitalize. Rodri also excels in this aspect. By observing the opposition's midfield shape, he positions himself in areas where he can receive the ball under minimal pressure. This positioning allows City to retain possession even when opponents press high. The best players use something called playing as the third player or the third man concept. They understand who's going to receive the ball next and position themselves to be an option for that player. This, most of the time, is just 3 steps, but the steps are unlimited. They can do this for the first, second, third, or even fourth player who's going to receive the ball. It shows the amount of detail of thinking that goes on when these players are on the field. And the best players are obsessive about details. They notice things others overlook. The direction of defenders' eyes, the way of their step, or even external factors like weather conditions, grass, or the sun. Details matter in football. Just by looking in the eyes of the opposition with the ball and knowing where his alternatives are, they are able to read a pass and interfere. It's not enough to scan the field. The best players use the information they gather to dictate the game. By combining observation, anticipation, and execution, they stay 3 or 4 steps ahead of their opponents. Midfielders have to develop this skill specifically because they are in the middle of the field all the time with players in front and behind them. In football, as in chess, success depends on awareness, anticipation, and execution. The difference between good and great players isn't raw talent, it's their ability to read and manipulate the game, staying multiple moves ahead. And perhaps that's why Pep loves midfielders over everything. Or maybe it's just because he used to be one himself. I would love to hear what you think down below. But next, make sure to check out why Pep Guardiola's Manchester City has run themselves into a problem they can't solve.